I've long held a memory that has been the source of pain and anguish throughout my life since childhood. My psychiatrist is convinced my memories are warped in an attempt to suppress trauma, and I began to believe him. I'd been on anti-anxiety medication nearly 22 years, and antidepressant meds for 18. I had eventually been convinced that those memories were in fact a result of suppression. I was finally starting to move past it all. And then this afternoon, I saw it. I saw the hidden television channel I'd been convinced was a false memory, and I screamed. My brother went missing when I was 9 years old, and his friend was found dead in our living room. I was questioned, as was my father, but the nature of Dan's death defied explanation, and the lack of evidence made the case unsolvable. So it went cold. I was considered an unreliable witness after my tearful testimony to the police. In the following months, I was taken to a child psychologist and eventually prescribed medications before undergoing years of repressed memory therapy. I was there when it happened though, and as of today, I'm now certain what I saw was in fact real. My parents raised Ryan and me in the suburb of Hatfield, Pennsylvania. We had a yard, a good education, good friends, and the latest 16-bit video game consoles. I was happy at age 9, enjoying the summer vacation as the sweltering heat of June baked the streets. My older brother Ryan was 14 and a bit of a smartass, always cracking jokes and getting into trouble. But still, he looked after me and was always quick to stick up for me if any bullies made the mistake of giving me a hard time. I truly was lucky in retrospect. One weekend, when Dad was working and Mom had driven off to run errands, I was playing Genesis in my room when Ryan began yelling from downstairs. "Mike, get down here! Check this out!" he called up from the living room. I heard the din of scattered applause from the TV. I shuffled out of my room and peered down at Ryan, who had flashed me his trademark smile, marked by the mole on his cheek. It had been a sore spot growing up, and led to him growing thick skin after being called Marilyn Monroe many times in elementary school. I looked past my grinning brother to the TV, to an image that warped and shifted like a scrambled adult station, bending the image. "Yeah, Dad locks the adult channel, perv," I called back. I shook my head, but then the image on the TV fixed itself. On screen, there is a panel of sitting people whose faces looked somehow wrong. They had all the normal features, eyes, noses, and mouths, but they looked strangely shaped and sized, like each was in the wrong place, or perhaps the wrong shape. They looked deformed and almost fake, and it was pretty creepy. "What the heck is it?" I asked. "Just come down here. Check this out." Ryan called and sat cross-legged in front of the glowing screen. I was curious and had nothing better to do. I shuffled my small feet down the carpeted stairs and stood next to Ryan, watching these strange people on screen. "This is not a real station," Ryan stated emphatically. "Look." He pointed his finger to the corner of the screen. The station read 23.3, a station in between stations. He then pointed to the dial. Our TV was one of those old-fashioned dial sets. The knob was resting between stops. "And this show was freaking weird." I then sat next to my brother as the image went in and out of a scrambled distortion. and we watched a TV show unlike anything I had seen before. 7 individuals with strange-looking faces all conversed in whispers between themselves. A shiny-faced bald man who appeared to be the show's host paced back and forth in front of a large, reflective black panel on the wall. The image bent and shifted as the scrambled effect came in and out, but I soon realized it was a large square of black glass, maybe 12 feet square, and likely fairly thick as well. After some deliberation, the seated individuals on the panel held up large cards with numbers from left to right. 3, 21, 53, 501, 413, 8, 42. I had no idea what those numbers could possibly mean, but I began to feel nervous watching. The people with pinched and strange features creeped me out more than anything. It was like they all had received severely botched plastic surgeries, warping them so far out of normal proportion that they all looked terrifying. "What is this?" I asked Ryan, who shushed me. "I don't know. Stop talking," he snapped. The camera switched to show a close-up of the standing man, the presumed host. My skin crawled immediately once his close-up filled the screen. Ryan gasped and then said, "God," under his breath. God was right. The man was bald, and the close-up revealed the skin on his grisly face was made up almost entirely of scar tissue. Shiny pink skin was pulled tight around the contours of his skull. It was reminiscent of a burn victim who had had his damaged skin grafted, but in a way that didn't make any logical sense. His teeth were pristine, sparkling white, but his lips were jagged, blended at the seam that was uneven, as if they had been split and patched together by unskilled surgeons. It was like some horrifically butchered cosmetic surgery had been performed on him for the sole purpose of making him look more disturbing. The host peered into the camera with small, black eyes beneath folded creases of misshapen lids. Little black beads that stared into me from the flickering screen. My neck hairs raised as he cocked his head slightly, as if he had become aware of something. I held my breath as he then excitedly pointed at the camera and spoke. 2913, 2913. The host called out in a muffled, strained voice through butchered lips. My brother and I looked at each other in shock. Our address was 2913 on our lane. It was surely a creepy coincidence, but I was 9 years old and absolutely terrified at that point. "Turn it off," I shouted, but Ryan just gawked, his jaw hanging open as he watched the TV. The host pointed a twisted finger to the audience, a slew of about 20 individuals whose backs were to the camera. The person who had been pointed at then stood and turned to the side to move down the aisle. It was a woman who looked sickly and tired. She was gaunt, emaciated, with bags under her eyes above sunken cheeks. Her age was a mystery, as her face had been mangled in a similar fashion as the rest. There was no way to tell if she was 25 or 85. She dragged one foot behind her as the host kept pointing a gnarled finger at her. As she shuffled out of the aisle and into the path to the stage, it was clear her left foot was dangling at the base, connected only by the skin itself. "Jesus Christ," Ryan exhaled in a hushed voice. The woman limped up the stairs to the black-floored stage and made her way to the panel, taking a seat at the end of the strange-looking individuals. A wide-angled shot showed a black-clad assistant rush over from behind a curtained stage left and hand her a placard reading 2913 in thick black numbers. These did not look like special effects, and they were far too graphic for television as far as I knew. "Turn it off!" I shouted to Ryan, but he seemed mesmerized by the bizarre television show. The camera then showed a close-up of the woman holding the sign, and my heart pounded in my chest. It wasn't a woman. It was a mutilated girl, much younger but cosmetically butchered just like the rest. Her face was scarred in lines under the eyes and cheeks, making her appear much older. She looked very familiar, however. It took me a while to figure out where I recognized that nose speckled with that particular pattern of freckles. I made the connection as my stomach sank into the floor. It was Amber Darton, the girl who had been all over the news after going missing, presumed abducted from her yard last year. I had seen her face so many times in the papers, the post office wall, and even milk cartons. There was no mistaking it. It was impossible to ignore. Her face had been terribly altered in what appeared to be an attempt to conceal her identity. "Ryan, that's Amber Darton, the girl who had gone missing," I whimpered. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Ryan, call the police." You're right. Holy crap." Ryan stood up, stumbled back, and raced to the cordless kitchen phone. He picked it up and dialed, but just seconds later, the image on screen warped back into wavy bands of a scrambled station before clicking to channel 23, where a baseball game was being aired. "No!" I shouted, and I approached the old TV set, hitting the side to try and restore the image. I fiddled with the knob, trying to balance it between stations, but it wouldn't stick or find that hidden station, no matter how slowly I rotated the dial. That strange show didn't come back, not when my mother returned home and listened to our pleas to believe us. Not when a uniformed police officer arrived at her door, which made our mother really lose it once she explained the hyperactive imagination of her boys, forcing us to apologize to the man. Nobody believed us. Ryan and I were both determined to find the station throughout the week, but had no luck. The station clicked very clearly between the actual stations, and the phenomenon Ryan had discovered seemed to have been a one-time fluke. Might have been pirate broadcasters, Ryan told me one day. Back in '87, hackers did it in Chicago with a max headroom mask. I don't know. He sounded like he was desperately trying to get over it and dismiss it as a prank or a fluke. I don't think he wanted to face the possibility that what we saw was real. Days passed, and I honestly thought that was the end of it. God, I wish it had been. A few weeks later, Ryan's friend Dan from school came over, and they watched horror movies late at night after Mom and Dad were asleep. I sneak-watched The Thing from atop the stairs without them knowing. After it was finished, they began chatting about strange, real-life horror stories and unexplained phenomena. And then, Ryan brought up the show. There's a hidden television station, I swear to God. My little brother and I both saw it. Ryan explained, to the scoffs of Dan, a larger kid who always wore leather jackets and fancied himself the long-lost member of the Misfits. Bullshit, Dan retorted after hearing the rundown of events. He smirked and then shook his head. If the station existed, hundreds or even thousands of people would have seen it. I swear it was real, man. Ryan walked up to the TV, fiddling with the station knob. We had done this dozens of times since the incident, and of course, there was never any signal again. Dan was chuckling as he drew a cigarette from a pack in his jacket pocket and headed to the door to go out for a smoke. But then it happened. There was a pop of static, a crackle as the image flickered, and then wavy bands of color streaked down the screen. Dan stopped mid-step, the unlit cigarette dangling from his lip. "Holy crap, this is it!" Ryan yelled out in a hushed tone to avoid waking our parents. I felt my gut squirm at the sight of it. It was something dangerous, something too dark to explore. Ryan and his tough guy friend Dan were the type to chase thrills though. I watched from the top of the stairs as those sickening faces appeared once again on the screen. The panel of disfigured individuals and that shiny-skinned host with beady eyes and perfect teeth beneath the ravaged flesh of his face. What the actual heck? Dan trailed off, and he came back into the living room to watch the horrible show. "This is crazy." I watched for a few seconds as the panel of individuals raised placards with numbers 814, 2, 601, 21B, 3F, 210, 2002. The host faced the screen once more in a grotesque close-up. I twinged with a shiver at seeing that terrible, butchered face staring intently into the camera, squinting malformed lids over shiny black eyes. 2913. 2913. Quick! He pointed a snarled finger to an emaciated male in the audience, who staggered slowly up and onto the stage to hold a newly painted card reading 2913, our address. My throat closed and my heart pounded in my chest. The host then walked to the large black glass square insert in the stage. I felt sick to my stomach, but couldn't look away. The black square pane of glass began to brighten as if a light was being turned down from the other side. The illumination revealed a room of a house and two people facing the camera. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what I was seeing. Behind the glass was a reflection of our living room, as viewed from the other side. Standing in it, facing the audience, was my brother Ryan and his friend Dan. "What the heck, man?" Dan shouted and took a step back from the screen. His actions were mirrored in the large square panel, as if it were a window to inside of our home. There was a harsh, distorted tone that rumbled through the TV, low and deep. It sounded for a second, stopped for two, and then sounded again on repeat. My fear had built to the point that I couldn't take it. "Turn it off!" I shouted from atop the stairs, only then alerting my brother and his friend to my presence. That analog, deep rumbling tone kept sounding, and my brother ran to the TV, fidgeting with the dial. The image remained as he switched stations. It remained even after he had pressed the power button. "This can't be real," Ryan said. He yanked out the plug of the television, and the screen finally went black with a crackle. But then the tone sounded again, distorted and deep, rumbling loud enough to tremble the upstairs floor beneath the carpet. There was a sharp bang followed by the cracking of wood. Ryan screamed a shrill scream, facing the out-of-view front door of our home. I ran into my room and slammed my door shut, locking it with shaking fingers. There was a horrible series of snaps and crunches, followed by the most horrible, shrill scream I'd ever heard. Everything after was a blur. I remembered my parents' voices, confused by the sounds that awoke them. My mother's scream, frantic yelling, my parents checking if I was okay. Sirens, police, ambulances. Everyone was asking if I knew where Ryan was. I did not. Dan was found splayed on the carpet. His wrists, ankles, and neck had been severed clean through, though the skin remained unscathed. It was as if they had been severed from within his body. His official cause of death was listed as internal hemorrhaging, though how he got his injuries was a complete mystery. And that was the end of it. I grew up into a scarred adult with some issues due to the trauma. I have an Ativan with breakfast and Paxil at lunch. I've been to therapy sessions through my teenage years and into my adult life. I was convinced there must have been some crazy trick. Or perhaps my mind had envisioned what it most feared on that screen. Ryan was presumed kidnapped and killed. We even had a funeral for him 7 years after the incident, once he was legally declared dead and absentee. I hadn't seen or heard from him in 30 years. Not until this afternoon. Today I was scouring the news and forcing down a TV dinner. I was flicking the stations, not paying attention to the channel, only to what was on. News, cooking, cartoons. And then my blood froze. I stared at the image I'd struggled all my life to convince myself was a delusion, a vivid hallucination, or some transfigured, repressed memory. The station read 23.3, and the familiar, nightmarish television set appeared once again. It was that same studio stage, and a row of disfigured people who appeared to have had horrific plastic surgeries. They were all new, butchered faces, but the exact same setup. The host was a bald, heavily scarred man, but clearly a different person. I watched the familiar routine of raising signs of street addresses when the close-up cam fixed on the mutilated visage of the host. 21B, 21B, he gurgled frantically, his crooked finger aiming at the screen before lowering to single out a woman in the audience. My heart stumbled in my chest until it hurt. My throat dried and my eyes widened with dread. I felt the icy claw of horror trace down my spine. I lived in apartment 21B on my street, but it wasn't the address that sent me screaming out my apartment door, down the stairs and into the streets. It was the butchered face of the host. It was the unmistakable mole on his mutilated cheek.